You know, the funny thing about death is that we talk about it as if it were somewhere far away, some distant horizon toward which we're all walking, reluctantly, nervously, pretending not to see it even though it's there, always there, watching from the edge of perception. But in truth, death isn't something that happens to you. Death is something that's happening right now. Cells are dying. Thoughts are dying. Entire versions of you that existed 10 minutes ago are gone, vanished into the ether of memory. So, if death is the end, then you've died thousands of times already. And yet, here you are, breathing, listening, existing. What then is actually ending? We mistake the dissolution of form for the end of being. But the form was never the point. The form is the costume, the mask through which the eternal peers for a brief performance. When the curtain falls, when the lights dim, the actor doesn't die. He removes the mask, smiles, and steps off stage. That's what death is. The moment the eternal remembers itself. But we've been taught to fear it. We build religions, hospitals, and even philosophies of immortality to protect ourselves from the great unknown. We talk of heaven and reincarnation, of legacy and memory, as if the continuation of the story could protect us from the silence that follows. Yet, maybe the silence isn't something to fear. Maybe it's the moment when the orchestra stops and we finally hear the space between the notes. See, consciousness doesn't end. It merely changes the window through which it looks. It's as if you've been peering through a stained glass window, believing that the colors and patterns were the whole of existence. Then one day, the glass cracks, and suddenly, light floods in from everywhere. The patterns are gone, yes, but the light that made them possible is never more real, more blinding, more infinite. And this is the paradox. We mourn the breaking of the glass, even though the glass was that kept us from seeing the whole. Death is not an erasure. It's an expansion. You see, our obsession with permanence, with continuity, is really a symptom of fear. The ego is terrified of death because it knows it is a temporary fiction. It's a narrator that mistakes itself for the story. And so it clings to possessions, to identity, to achievements, to names carved in stone. But the deeper layers of the self, the ones beneath language, those are untouched by death. Think of a wave rising from the ocean. For a moment, it has shape, identity, even ambition. I am this tall, this proud, this separate from the sea. Then it breaks, dissolves, and returns. The ocean doesn't mourn the wave. It was the wave. It is the wave. The wave never ceased to exist. It just stopped pretending to be separate. That's what dying is, remembering that you were never the wave. And yet, how often do we spend our lives trying to keep the wave from falling? We build empires, write poems, fall in love, make children, all of it, in some way, a plea to the universe. Let me stay. But to stay means to stagnate. And life itself, this dance of form and dissolution, abhors stagnation. It thrives on change, on transformation, on letting go. Death is simply life's way of renewing the dream. If you've ever truly let go of something, an old identity, a relationship, a belief, then you've already tasted death in miniature. That moment of surrender, when the old story collapses and you stand naked before the unknown, that is the death experience. Only in the physical act of dying, there's no return ticket. You cross the threshold completely, and the universe, with unspeakable gentleness, whispers, "Now you see." And maybe that's why, in those moments near death, the stories of people who've glimpsed the other side, there's always that recurring theme: light, unity, peace, boundlessness. What they touch is not an afterlife, but the absence of boundaries itself, the infinite remembering itself as infinite. We think of death as a door closing, but what if it's a window opening? You see, consciousness is not in the body. The body is in consciousness. The body is a kind of local broadcast, a temporary signal that consciousness uses to play the game of matter. When the signal ends, consciousness doesn't vanish. It simply tunes to another frequency. The caterpillar doesn't mourn its cocoon. The cocoon was never a prison. It was a womb. Death, too, is a womb for whatever comes next. But because we live in a culture that worships surfaces, that fears silence, that mistakes motion for meaning, we forget this. We rush. We distract ourselves. We build lives of noise so that we never have to hear the quiet truth humming beneath it all. You are not what dies. To face death is to face reality unmasked. The Tibetans, spoke of the moment of death as the great mirror, when all illusions fall away, and you are confronted not with punishment or reward, but with the totality of your own being. The movie ends, the credits roll, and you find that you were both the audience and the actor all along. So, perhaps death is not an event at the end of life. Perhaps it is the lens through which life itself is understood. To live with the awareness of death is to live fully awake, because only when you realize that every moment is slipping away do you truly start to see it. And that's the secret. Death doesn't rob life of meaning. It gives it meaning. If you were immortal, you would never pay attention. You'd never feel the texture of time, the sweetness of impermanence, the ache of love that knows it cannot last. It is precisely because we die that life becomes precious. The falling of the leaf is what reveals the beauty of the tree. And maybe if we could truly see it, not think about it, not philosophize it, but see it, death would no longer appear as the enemy, but as the most intimate friend, the one who, in the end, returns you to yourself. There's a moment in the dying, in the absolute letting go, where the ego finally shuts up. All the questions, all the fears, all the endless commentary about what will happen, they vanish, and suddenly there's only awareness. Not your awareness, not you as an isolated point in time and space, but awareness itself, the deep humming substrate of existence, vibrating beneath all appearances. And it's not scary, it's not a threat, it's the most familiar thing you've ever been, and yet it is so vast, so impossibly large, that your mind wants to collapse in awe. Imagine for a moment that your life is a novel written on a single page. Every experience, every thought, every laugh, every heartbreak, all inked on that page. And when the page turns, or better yet, when the page dissolves entirely, the story doesn't vanish. It merges with the book, with the library, with the infinite library of consciousness itself. You were never merely the words. You were the peeper, the ink, the library, and the reader all at once. And that is death. the dissolving of the page back into the library. We struggle to understand it, to give it form, to make it something we can digest. But the truth is, you can't understand it while clinging to the ego. The ego is a small lens. It wants to frame life in terms of gain and loss, arrival and departure, possession and possession lost. But death is neither gain nor loss. It is neither arrival nor departure. It is a perspective shift so radical that every word we know fails. And yet, when it happens, it is the most natural thing in the world. It's like exhaling after holding your breath for years, a relief so profound it feels like laughter and tears at the same time. Think of it like this. The universe has always been self-aware.
Every star, every planet, every fluttering leaf participates in this vast reflection. Life is simply consciousness experimenting with focus, attention, and form. The body is a lens, and death is the moment when the lens is lifted. Nothing stops, nothing dies in the sense we imagine. The forms we inhabit, the thoughts, the names, the reputations, they crumble, yes, but the underlying awareness continues, exploring, morphing, expanding infinitely. And so, paradoxically, death is the ultimate liberation, not because it frees you from suffering, though it does, but because it frees you from the illusion that you were ever truly limited at all. That constricted, fragile self that you think you are is like a shadow cast on a cave wall. Death is turning around and seeing the sun shining directly behind you. In practical terms, this understanding transforms life. If you truly grasp that death is not annihilation, but transformation, every moment becomes a gift. Every encounter becomes sacred. Every breath becomes a meditation. You stop wasting your energy trying to defend a fragile identity and begin to explore the depth, the texture, the beauty of existence itself. I remember once walking through the Amazon rainforest, the air thick with humidity, the smell of decay and growth mingled into a single intoxicating perfume. And I realized that the forest, in all its complexity and chaos, had no fear of death. Leaves fell, insects died, trees rotted and became soil, and yet the forest itself thrived. It wasn't that death didn't exist there. Death was everywhere, but it wasn't an enemy. It was the engine of life, the teacher, the ultimate alchemist turning the old into the new. And this is what humans have forgotten. We think of death as a monster hiding under the bed, but it is more like the sun hidden behind clouds, waiting to illuminate the world. To live in awareness of death is to align yourself with that cosmic rhythm, to realize that every ending is also a beginning, every collapse a transformation. Consider for a moment the ritual of letting go in your daily life. How often do you resist change? How often do you cling to relationships, habits, or beliefs that no longer serve you? Each time you resist, you experience a miniature death, a chance to step into the unknown. And each time you embrace it, you touch something eternal. Death is the ultimate teacher in this regard. It whispers, let go or be carried away. Even psychologically, we encounter death constantly. Every thought, every memory, every fleeting sense of self is dying and being reborn in each instant. The you who began this sentence is already gone, replaced by the you who hears it now. And still, there is continuity. Awareness persists, unbroken, witnessing its own transformations. So I ask you, what are you truly afraid of? The falling of the body? The ending of a name? The cessation of habits? Or are you afraid of recognizing that the boundaries you cherish, the sense of I, are illusions? Because when you understand that death is not annihilation, fear loses its grip. You realize that the self that panics about endings is itself temporary, a shadow that dissolves, leaving only light.
And here's the exquisite irony. The more you embrace death, the more fully you inhabit life. Because you no longer waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable, you begin to experience freedom in every gesture, every heartbeat, every fleeting instant. You dance closer to reality, closer to the infinite, and the world becomes alive in ways you never imagined. So let death be your teacher. Let it show you the impermanence of all forms and the permanence of consciousness itself. Let it remind you that the universe is always more vast, more mysterious, more boundless than your mind can contain. Because when the moment comes, as it inevitably will, you will not be afraid. You will not resist. You will simply flow into the ultimate perspective shift, the unveiling of existence, the reunion with the infinite. And when you do, perhaps you will finally understand there is no end. There is only transformation. There is only awareness expanding, exploring, becoming. And so, as we approach the final truth, let us imagine death not as a door closing, but as a horizon unfolding. It is the moment when the mirror of your existence reflects not a fragment of self, but the infinite panorama of consciousness itself. Think of it like diving into a river that has no beginning and no end. You may struggle to hold on to your limbs, to orient yourself, to know where the water ends and the air begins. But soon, if you let go, you become the current. You are the water. You are the river. And in that flowing, you are free. We live our lives as though permanence were possible. We label, we categorize, we hoard memories and experiences as if accumulating them could protect us from the ultimate dissolution. But the truth is, the most profound treasures are never owned. They are experienced, moment by moment, and then they slip away. This is not loss. It is life affirming itself. And death is simply the ultimate demonstration of this principle, the ultimate letting go. Have you noticed how in the forest the fallen leaves nourish the soil, which nourishes the roots, which give rise to new leaves? There is a sublime justice in this process. Nothing is wasted. Nothing truly ends. Death is simply the transformation from one form to another, from one perspective to another. And when we apply this understanding to ourselves, we realize that we are not departing from life. We are rejoining the eternal dance, shifting form, tuning into a broader, more expansive reality. And what is this reality, if not a cosmic dream in which we are both actors and audience, playwrights and spectators? We fear the dream's end, but the end of the dream is not annihilation. It is awakening. You wake to the fact that the stage was never separate from the audience, that the character you played was never separate from the storyteller, that your mortal self was a fleeting lens for the infinite consciousness that has always been and always will be. The paradox is exquisite. By confronting death, you come alive. By embracing impermanence, you touch eternity. By realizing that your I is temporary, you discover that awareness is limitless. And here is the subtle, almost mischievous lesson. The fear of death is merely the fear of losing what was never yours to begin with. You never truly owned the body, the thoughts, the possessions, the reputation, the social masks. They were borrowed, lent to you by the cosmos for a brief performance. Death simply calls the loan due. And so, living with this understanding changes everything. Imagine walking through your day, fully aware that each moment could be your last, yet not in a state of panic or desperation, but in a state of serene attention. Every glance, every word, every gesture becomes a meditation, a celebration, a sacred act. You stop resisting the flow of existence. You stop trying to cling to the ungraspable. And in that surrender, you experience joy. Not a shallow, fleeting pleasure, but a profound, deep-seated contentment. The recognition that life is a mystery, death is a doorway, and consciousness is the constant thread weaving it all together. And perhaps the most liberating realization of all is that death is personal and impersonal at once. It is the intimate experience of losing form, yet it is the universal truth of all existence. The wave falls, but the ocean remains. The leaf decays, but the tree endures. The self dissolves, but awareness persists. In the act of dying, we become both nothing and everything, both singular and infinite. It is a union so profound that language falters, and yet, in the silence, understanding blooms. Now imagine for a moment that you carry this awareness into every choice, every encounter, every thought. How would it change the way you love, the way you forgive, the way you perceive beauty, sorrow, joy, or even fear itself? When you know that death is not a cessation, but a shift in perspective, the trivialities of everyday life lose their power to bind you. You begin to inhabit existence more fully, more openly, more courageously. You become the conscious participant in the eternal unfolding of the cosmos. And so, when the final breath comes, if you have lived in awareness, if you have recognized the truth of impermanence, if you have allowed death to teach you rather than terrorize you, that breath is not an ending. It is a return, a re-emergence, a remembering. The infinite does not vanish. It only changes the lens through which it perceives itself. You do not cease, you simply see differently. In the end, we are not victims of mortality. We are participants in a cosmic ritual of transformation. Each passing moment is a rehearsal for the ultimate shift. Each experience, each joy, each grief is an invitation to practice letting go, to touch the infinite, to dance with impermanence. And when the final curtain falls, we do not fear it, we embrace it, because we understand at last that death is not the enemy, not the thief, not the silence that swallows us. It is the teacher, the midwife, the doorway to perspective unbound.
So I leave you with this. Do not dread death. Do not fixate on it as a loss. Instead, cultivate awareness of it as a guide, a mirror, a lens through which life becomes infinitely more precious. Let death remind you that nothing is permanent, and in that impermanence lies the profound gift of now. When you see this clearly, every breath becomes luminous, every encounter sacred, every heartbeat a note in the eternal symphony. And perhaps in those quiet moments of contemplation, when the mind finally rests and the ego pauses, you will glimpse the truth. You never die. You merely shift, transform, expand, and return. And in that return, you realize the ultimate wonder, that existence, in all its mystery, beauty, and boundless complexity, has never left you. It has always been and always will be here in the infinite now. Death is not the end. It is the ultimate change of perspective. It is the unveiling of what has always been. It is the great mirror in which consciousness recognizes itself. And when you finally see it, truly see it, you will laugh, not in fear, but in awe, for you will have touched the eternal. And in that moment, there is nothing to fear, nothing to resist, nothing to lament. There is only the unfolding, the infinite, the eternal dance of awareness itself.